Welcome, everybody, to Let's Talk Computer Science, a podcast dedicated to talking about the past, present, and future of computer science. This podcast is made possible by our friends at Rex K12. Be sure to check out their amazing CS platform, including courses on cybersecurity, app development, and artificial intelligence. Yes, it does exist. Don't have a CS teacher? Not a problem. Rex is now providing instructors as part of their platform, so be sure to check them out at rexk12.com. And today we get a lot of CS teachers, we get a lot of directors of technology, instructional technology, but it's rare that we ever get a superintendent. So I'm excited to invite Dr. Elizabeth Alvarez, superintendent at Forest Park, right up there in Illinois. Dr. Alvarez, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
Superintendent, so you get to handle a little bit of everything, but before we get into kind of your day-to-day stuff, let's talk about your background. So give me a little bit, let's take your origin story. What got you into education? And then maybe along the way, is there a moment where there was some sort of ed tech or technology that kind of made you think, oh, maybe this technology stuff isn't so bad either for school?
Sure. Um, I share my story a lot in regards to why I got into education, but um, the bottom line with this is that I didn't have a really great education in elementary school, and that has a lot to do with race and equity in itself. But then when I went to high school, I had these phenomenal teachers there that really lit my spirit, showed me the power of what an educator can do. And from that point on, I got very excited about it and realizing that all what educators can do is really bring a sense of belonging and a belonging to children. So I went into the career of education. And then as I got excited more about education, I actually went into science education. And then I was the middle school science teacher for a very long time. I taught for 13 years, and they put me in charge of the science fair. I actually worked in Chicago Public Schools and helped with the science fair there in the city fair. So I'm all about science fairs. I love them. Um, I know a lot of parents don't, but I do. And then in regards to your question about computer science, I'm going to age myself if I say this, but we literally had in high school, we had these really big computers and you had to put some code into them and then you could make like smiley faces
Yes.
or and I remember getting really excited about it when I'm like, oh, I did that just by, using, some code in there. But then I really got more excited, and I know it was just more recently with it, with Bluetooth,
Really?
like just the Bluetooth itself, like me getting to my car and I'm able to it jumps, my phone could jump to there. And I remember a cousin of mine said, this is magic. I don't understand this. Well, how does it work? And it is kind of interesting to understand, like, how does this work? As well as like the Dyson. That's
Yes.
really cool. And you like take it apart, figure out, oh, this is how it works. So the things that look magical are what interests me the most. And so that's what has really got me excited about computer science and just the stuff that we haven't even discovered yet,
Right.
that's out there.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, you're not aging yourself too much when you say a big computer, unless it's the size of a room. Because back in the 50s, they had those computers the size of a room. No, I think you and I probably grew up around the same kind of. Yes, I remember like the turtle logo programming where you can make it like
Yeah.
move a little bit, or use a was it print shop that you could use where you could print out like the banners of things. This is
And it was really long
yeah, the dot matrix
altogether.
printers. Yes. Yes, that harkens back to way back then. So let's talk about science real quick too before we talk about your kind of current role as a superintendent. So you, I know again, and you mentioned this at the outset, is typically a field of science is also very similar to computer science in that you don't see a lot of diversity, you don't see a lot of gender diversity, especially. So your interest in that I think is unique in a lot of ways. What were some of the obstacles that you felt like you had to overcome to kind of continue that interest? Because what we've seen, I have 3 girls, and what I've seen is that it definitely research shows that they drop at about middle school, they start getting disinterested in any of this coding, science, computer science, whatever. What made you kind of stick that out, or what should we be doing to help with that?
So you're absolutely right in regards to these obstacles and how we lose girls' interests. I present on that as well to talk about, normally all the way up to the fourth grade, our girls are really interested in science. And then something happens, and a lot of it has to do with um, girls in general wanting to be accepted. And too many times, by the time you get to that age, and as we're changing, we don't want to be looked upon as weird or why are you interested in that? And so we tend to get reserved and quiet about it. Even though we may know the answers to it, we have a tendency to keep quiet because unfortunately there's the hormones that go in and you start liking boys or vice versa. You might like start liking other people. And then all of a sudden you're like, I don't want them to think differently of me. And so we really want at a very young age to really express the curiosity and the questioning that goes with science. Because without questioning, there wouldn't be all this great stuff that happened there. But some of the obstacles, obviously, is being in a room where you're the only woman,
Right.
being in a room where you're the only Latina, um, and and you feel very strange saying, "Why is it that I have to carry this burden of being the only one speaking for my gender or speaking for my ethnicity?" And that in itself, like you feel it really heavy because every time you speak, you're like, "That's me speaking, not necessarily for the entire group
Yeah.
of people." And then you feel responsible for that. And it's unfair because you look around the room, and around the room, there may be five or six other people who are same ethnicity or the same gender. And then there's you. So that's one barrier in itself. I will say that I felt more of a barrier with my ethnicity than I did with being a woman.
Interesting.
But overall, because of my ethnicity, I've always used it as my superpower in a sense where because I'm Latina, and many times you don't understand the culture, the others may not understand the culture. I felt that I was allowed to be a little bit more rebellious or a little bit more questionable, so that people weren't asking, like, why are you asking all these questions or why are you here? And so that in itself allowed me to um, be in the room or allowed myself a seat in the room because I used it as a superpower.
I love that using that. Yeah, the idea of taking your culture and saying, okay, this is going to be the thing that emboldens me to go in and step in and say the question, ask the questions that I need to ask, and having that kind of support of your culture behind you. I think that's such an important thing. I'm reflecting as you're talking about my 14-year-old daughter, who right now is a freshman, was a science nerd all the way up until this point in her life. She has been the kid who plays with bugs. She's the kid who digs in the dirt, and now it's happening. It's she's starting to
Yeah.
do the I'm spending more time making sure I look a certain way, and then I just noticed, like, I looked at her science grades this morning. I'm like, they're starting to tail off. And she's like, well, maybe I'm not, and I'm like, okay, so the stuff you're talking about is hitting near and dear to my heart too, because that I feel like she still has a passion and that's where she wants to go with her career. But I see kind of the hormones kicking in, and I see kind of the maybe it's the outside pressures of what's happening to her and to girls in general that says, like, we expect you to kind of fit in this box, and and we're doing it to ourselves, I guess, right?
Well, yeah, and then there's research that says like women, as soon as you get to a certain age, and probably it's after sixth grade, we do better when we're in a room with only women because we're shining a little bit more, and we're not stopping ourselves from actually being more curious when it comes to science. And so being in an all girls school really pushes you further. And I'm thinking, I mean, I went to an all girls school when I was in high school, probably why my awakening happened too, because I had all these powerful women, young ladies, friends that were mine that actually pushed each other rather than
Yeah.
pushing us down. And so the people I can think of that are still around my circle from high school, like we all went into education in some type of education, not necessarily science, but we all went into education because of it.
And you've pushed that education to a point to where you're now at the ultimate, the pinnacle spot, the superintendent spot, which, in my state of Texas, when I go to superintendent's conferences, I will tell you it is probably 80% male driven.
Mhm.
So continuing to buck the trend, Elizabeth, now you're going from science to a position that is mostly male. Talk to me about the role, and talk to me about kind of like this. Do you still feel this, when you walk into a room of other superintendents, you're like, okay, I can see that I'm, there's one of like me, and there's maybe a few others that close to me. Like, what is that like as a leader now in schools?
So it actually hasn't changed as much. And as a matter of fact, after the pandemic, there was a lot of exodus of superintendency, and a lot of them were women, and they were replaced with men. And so where I'm at, I'm in the West Cook in Illinois. I'm the only Latina there. There are other women of color, I will say that, but there's very few of us, and the majority of them are male, white males
Hmm.
that hold this position of superintendent. But I will say my first year, it's a little nerve-wracking, because unfortunately you do get to question yourself. Um, I don't want to call it like the
Imposter
um,
syndrome.
yeah,
Yeah.
imposter syndrome, because honestly, the more I heard someone mention this to me, saying that imposter syndrome actually is something that men made up for
I
women to basically
believe
feel
it.
like you're not supposed to be in the room. So it hits you, you question yourself, and you're just like, no, you're here. You deserve to be here. I will say my first year was pretty quiet, and I sat in the back. And then I started moving, inching myself further and further into the room. Um, and you make your friends that are around you, and you also keep them close. But I will say that those who are close to me are all men because that's who's around me, with
Right.
the exception of these two other women who are around the same area as me, and we talk, and we keep each other up, and we talk to each other, and we text each other. So now it's changed in that bit where I know who I can go to, and I know they're there to support me. And honestly, there's still the people there in the superintendent meetings that I have not spoken to or have not reached out to because there is that barrier where you're still like, you don't know me yet, or we haven't found the commonality besides the fact that we're superintendents. But I mean, I still have time and they still have time, and it's neither here nor there. It's a matter of we're in a meeting. By the time the meeting's over, when do you get that
Right.
opportunity?
Yeah, and some of it is you're new to the field in some ways, so it's like getting making those connections. But then also,
Hmm.
gender and race sometimes play a role in that too, whether it's subconscious or not. I very much agree with your comment about the idea that imposter syndrome. I've with my colleagues, of course, I work in education too, so and mostly with teachers, which is ironically 80% female. It's the opposite, which
Yep.
it should be level, but it's not. And so, as a teacher, I've noticed more and more my female colleagues do feel like they suffer from that, and I think it's a societal thing too. I was like, either that or it's just a lot of of course, there's a lot of men who probably should suffer from it who don't. They just say whatever they think. And then like, well, that didn't really make any sense. So it's interesting you put
But
that to
there's
light.
also another thing that I want to mention is that there's also the other side where, yes, the staff is mostly women, but then a lot of them have issues having a woman leader.
Yes.
And so there was surveys that we did before, and especially Latina women, we were at the bottom, saying
Wow.
like the one who knows the least, the one who can't lead. And I just recalled like, well, why? How many of them have had Latina leaders? And I honestly believe it's because they haven't. And
Right.
so when you don't picture that person there, you're like, well, I don't think they're going to be good at it. So you're going to put the males up there. Black women actually scored pretty high.
Okay. So
So that was pretty decent to see that.
that is good. I think you're right. I think a lot of historical and traditional bias is playing a role in all of our minds whenever we do those surveys too. You're like, well, what have I associated with? What am I familiar with? And depending on the area, like you say, if you're one of the few Latinas in that area, it's going to be hard for them to associate leadership in that sense because in their mind, that's what they've only, even though they should be thinking broader than that. But let's talk about your school too, because I know you've created a couple of exciting things there, some STEAM labs in your district. So tell me a little bit about that. Of course, not surprising at all, given the science background you just told me. So bringing that science and bringing it into your schools, and now this is Illinois, so is it a K-8 school or high school? I know they have different districts there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have pre-K all the way to eighth grade,
Okay.
different schools. There's four total, and so I will start when I was a teacher. I probably was teaching maybe 5 or 6 years, and I went and pitched this to my principal, saying, "Is there a possibility we could have a STEAM lab?" Now, keep in mind, this is probably like mid to late '90s,
Before the word
and
steam existed, I think. Well, I mean,
yeah,
steam didn't wasn't associated with that, right? I love it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Ahead of your
he was
time.
just like,
Okay. Yeah.
what are you talking about? And I was like, this would just be so awesome. And obviously, I never got it. And then when I went on to become a principal, I was able to get a new building and made sure that there were STEAM labs within that building. And one of them they actually named after me, which I thought was really sweet. Because after I got the
Oh,
promotion, the parents had requested it, like, you're the one who's been pushing for this. So that was sweet. So I come here to Forest Park, and one of the things that I always question, like when you walk into a school, you want to feel what's coming at me. Like, is it language arts? Is it the fine arts? Is it gifted? Is it IB? Is it dual language? Like, there's something that usually screams out when you walk into a building, like it talks to you.
right.
And I didn't get that. I didn't, when I walked into my schools, I didn't really get a feel for what we stood for. And obviously, my heart's always been with science. I think it's the way to go for everything. And so my assistant soup came up to me and he said, let's start it. Let's go ahead and start some STEAM labs. And we pitched it to the board. and the board was all for it, saying let's do it. And we were able to get 2 STEAM labs in 2 of our schools. Um, our intermediate school has it, and in our middle school. The middle school looks a little better in there, but we wanted to make sure there was an area for research, an area for design, and an area for presentation.
Beautiful.
And in that way, our children can move around their STEAM lab wherever they need to be. But we also requested like a quiet room so that our children, particularly children with diverse needs that may need that space, or also a group that may need that space just to talk while others may be building something on the side. And in each of the labs also has a green screen, so they could use that as well when they're designing what they need to design, and eventually go on to their presentation, which looks like a theater sense. It kind of ovals through and it's very cushiony. But these are brand new. And so we did our ribbon cutting ceremony in the beginning of the school year. And now they're being utilized, and just so many different ideas. Like, so now we are partnering with UIC, University of Illinois, to bring robots.
Oh, nice.
So our children will have that as well. And obviously the AI is really important,
Right.
that we are starting up here. We developed a policy, the board and I, because there isn't one yet, a policy for artificial intelligence and how we're going to use it here at Forest Park. So the policy actually got developed. And the funny part about that policy is we actually developed it with AI.
Yes, why not? I mean, that yes. That's what I was gonna so I was gonna ask you, so this you're getting in with the science and the robots and the future is, where we're headed with that. And that's what I love about what you've built there is that you built something that's going to prepare these kids for their future, which is, robotics will be a part of it. AI is going to be a part of it. What's your kind of overall thought on AI in schools? And by the way, kudos to you guys for having a policy because I've done research of this for the last summer. And honestly, it's about 5% of schools that I've come across that have anything in stone right now with it. Now, some are developing guidelines to be fair, but actual policy is a different animal because you have to have kind of board. You know how it is. You have to have
Yeah.
everybody on board with it, and the board has to approve it. So, what's your kind of thoughts on AI generally in education?
It's not going away, so we can't hide from it. I also believe that we can't wait to see what everyone else is going to do. So we need to start developing and doing it ourselves. Um, One big thing is I want to make sure that we're being responsible with it. So obviously, you want to get away from any plagiarism,
Right.
and so a lot of it, and the thing is, it's about cognitive thinking. So if we're putting certain things into the AI or whichever using the GP chat, um, then we want to make sure children are discussing what was put in there, what should be taken out, and then how are you going to present that? Because a paper is one thing, but actually presenting it and explaining it is a whole different thing. And also talking within the group of why this is important and how whatever you're developing. And so that's really going to be the key thing about the discussion and the questions that our teachers are coming up with, because they may say you're going to use AI to develop, a story regarding a hero sense and a villain, and then you're going to develop another one. You're going to compare them together, and now tell us what's the input you're going to put in. So it's going to be a lot of different things that a teacher can use with AI, but they have to be responsible with it. And so making sure homework assignments are not, you're going to do a book report.
Right. Yeah. That might need to
Because,
change. Yeah.
yeah, so that's not going to really be useful to us. So again, it has to be discussion in there, questioning from children, questioning from teachers that really is going to move it up to have that productive struggle that every child needs. And so we wanted to make sure that that policy had that, and also going with guidance and rules. So we are now partnering also with MIT, and
Nice.
they have developed a curriculum already. I believe it's a 6-week curriculum where they start talking about the differences of what we could do with AI. So the first things like being responsible with it, like the core things with AI. So there's a lot of different things that we're doing with it, and we're developing now to put it into our curriculum.
And I'll add a link to that. That's an MIT open course on artificial intelligence. I'll add a link to that to our show notes too. Yeah, I think what you talked about hits on all the main points that even in writing the book that I'm writing on right now on AI, basically it goes into what you just said. It's all about process, where we focused in education too much on product, like that book report. Now you're talking about process, like thinking critically, having the discussions you mentioned, talking about the responsible use, talking about biases, which you and I have talked about already. We have human bias. Well, so does AI, right? Because it's, you know,
Hmm.
it's fed by humans. So these are richer discussions than we'd ever have with just a traditional book report anyway. So I love that you guys have already embraced it, and your leadership is saying let's keep rolling with that. So kudos to
Yeah,
you
and
for that.
honestly, on
Yeah,
on the World Wide Web, you can't trust everything.
right. And now it's just gotten even better, because I actually just developed today. I was playing with some voice cloning software, and I
Mm.
was able to input a little bit of my voice from these podcasts essentially. And within, I need about 10 minutes worth of footage, but after about 10 minutes, it's basically my voice. And I sent my friend a voice text, and said, "This isn't me, but it sounds like me." And he goes, "That sounded just like you," which is fun, but also scary, and much like everything in technology, right?
Right. I
Exciting
mean,
and
things that
scary.
people can use and cheat with and
Yeah.
say this is what the person said. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we want our children to use it maturely and in the right way, and respectfully, and being good humans.
And for the record, this is Elizabeth and I are both human. This is not, we are not AI avatars talking on this podcast. So we want to go ahead and point that out. Where can people find out more about you and the great work that you're doing?
So obviously, the first place to go is our website, which is FSD91, FPSD91.org. So
PSD91.org. Okay.
Forest Park School District 91. You could do it that way too. I also have a LinkedIn, which is under Elizabeth Alvarez, comma PhD,
Okay.
and I also have I guess it's called X now
X.
instead
I
of
know.
Twitter.
Do you call it Twitter? Are you Xing, or are you tweeting, or what are we doing? So your former X Twitter account is?
Is E Alvarez 9 D91.
All right. Awesome. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the Let's Talk Computer Science podcast. I look forward to some point getting up and checking out these new STEAM labs that you have up there at Forest Park.
Oh yeah, anytime. Oh, you know what? If you go on our website, you could see the video of it.
Awesome. Oh, let me do that too. I'll add that to the notes as well for our listeners out there. Because, of course, this is, some of you are listening, some of you are watching. But if you want to go click on the links, again, check the show notes out for video on that STEAM lab. I'm going to check it out right after this is over. And thank you, all of you out there, for listening to Let's Talk Computer Science. And, of course, our friends at Rex K12 for making this podcast possible. Be sure to check out their platform at rexk12.com. We all know technology will be a part of our future. And as educators and leaders, it's our role to make sure that all of our students, that means all of them, have an opportunity in that future as well. This is Carl Hooker, signing off.